Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 911. My opponent started off with e4 here. I went with d5, the center counter or Scandinavian defense. He took. I played knight f6. You can see that's the second choice here. And then he went with d4. Chess Explained, I saw one of his videos recently and he was recommending this move bishop b5 check. And he was saying after this he just doesn't understand why black wants to play this way because it just leads to a good position for white. So I thought I would at least show this line. Bishop d7 to block the check is pretty much the only move here. You could try blocking with the knight, but pieces will get a little bit tangled, I guess. Anyway, bishop d7 seems fine. And then there's two ways to retreat the bishop. If the bishop goes back to c4, defending the pawn, then you have this bishop g5 move with harassing the queen, and after this pawn comes forward, you've created a little pawn weakness. So Chess Explained was recommending this bishop e2 move, and then that just gives up the pawn right away. So, well, it's even. Black gets the pawn back, and then after d4, it's important that black remembers to move the bishop again. It's kind of a funny line that way, but this bishop moved twice. It came out and then came back, so you're not really losing time if you move the bishop here and then to here. It's all about the same. And let's see, after knight f3, e6. This is a position that Chess Explained was saying is just good for white. It's not like there's a material edge here, but there's some kind of positional advantage. Pieces are a little better placed, and there's a little more space in the center. I think, at my level, it's certainly still a playable opening. I haven't had any trouble with this position myself, but I just wanted to point out those little wrinkles in that line. After the check, you block with the bishop, and after the bishop moves away, you eventually move your bishop again. So don't be afraid to move your bishop twice. Anyway, let's go back to the game. In this game, my opponent continued at the main line, d4, get the pawn back. He plays knight to f3. Bishop g4, g6 is the other way to play it. You have sort of two choices there. I went with bishop g4, I went bishop e2, and I went e6. So I think this is all okay. Looks like we're following main moves here. Bishop e7. We're just getting down into a portion of the database as you do step by step. The number of games gets smaller and smaller. And right here we get out of the opening book after c4. Knight b6 is the normal move here, and I went knight to f6. So let's just looking at knight b6 for a moment. It's putting a little bit of pressure on this c-pawn. It almost looks like you could take here and drag the bishop away and then grab the pawn. But in fact, it doesn't quite work because the bishop on this diagonal is hitting the loose pawn here and threatening to win a trapped rook in the corner, actually. So you can't take it right away, but you are kind of threatening to eventually get some pressure on that pawn. So at some point, white will probably spend a move to play something like b3 to hold on to that pawn securely. So I think that's the justification for knight b6. It does eventually force white to respond in some way, so it kind of gains a tempo. But on the other hand, knight to f6 is not bad in this particular position. It seems to be okay. Although the chess engine and the opening book both prefer knight b6, so I just want to explain why that might be a better move. I think it's all about time. Maybe you're falling a little bit behind in your development here as black. Okay, so white continues with knight c3 at castle. Goes bishop to e3, and I go a6. So a6 actually was reasonably motivated. I couldn't remember for a while why I played that, but and I wanted to get in this move c5, and if he takes, I wanted to play queen c7 to round up that pawn. And so I didn't want the knight coming here to harass my queen, so I was playing a6 as a way to prepare c5. But it doesn't seem to be a good move. Knight bd7 is just what should be played. That directly prepares c5. Yeah, it's just the better move. So a6 is a bit of a time waster, especially after he plays queen b3 and I defend the pawn. Then there's no more. Well, I could play c5 here, but There's a question of what is this pawn on a6 really doing? So kind of a wasted move there. An interesting sidelight here is that I didn't have to play queen c8. I could have played knight c6 and just continued to develop. It's actually not safe to take this pawn. Hadn't spotted this idea, but after queen takes b7, knight here, knight to a5, and the queen is trapped. Notice that this knight is covering these squares, and this knight is covering these squares, so that whole diagonal is covered. And up here, let's see, that's covered by a knight, that's covered by a bishop, that's covered by a pawn, it's covered by a pawn. And the queen just has no escape. So it's kind of interesting. It looks open around the queen. It looks like there's a lot of squares it can go to, but in fact every square is covered. So so that would have been an interesting way to play. See if he fell for that one. Anyway, I just defended here. I went h3, kicking my bishop. So all this is good for white because of my imprecise moves. White is doing quite well here. Let's go forward a few moves. Even these moves, weakening the king side a bit, but kicking me around, they don't seem to be any problem. And he can gain the bishop pair. White can gain the bishop pair here. So all this seems to be good. And I'll just get up to the next mistake here, which is g5. So after I played e5, he should probably respond with d5. And I looked at this for a while. It looks like this is just a very good position for white. Something like rook b8 could be played here. So if he takes, I take back with a tempo on his queen. Say queen c2 to get away from that. I take, he takes. This is a computer line, of course. I take, and he takes with the bishop. So that's one of the lines the computer comes up with that thinks that is best play or something like it for both sides. And you can see that white has the bishop pair. He's got very active pieces. His king side looks a little weakened, but I don't have any immediate way to exploit it. And yeah, it's just a good position for white. So that's how white could have played. G5 actually gives up the advantage. And it's because of this tactic that I had spotted. After I take here, if he takes my knight, I take back with the bishop, and I'm still defending this pawn, and it's still forking those two pieces. So I get my piece back with interest. Say he can take here, I'll take. And it's 3-2 on this side and 3 against 3. So I win a pawn in that line. And also in the line, the way he played it, I win a pawn. I think the way he played it was fine. Let's see, he took on d4 first, and then I just get my knight out of the way. Oh, I think in this line he holds on to the pawn. Yeah, so the way he played it was actually a little better. He loses a pawn later, so we'll get to that. Let's see, so this is probably about even along here. He played bishop to g4, that's fine. I went queen c7 to unpin my knight. And then he played bishop takes d7. It's kind of a mysterious exchange. He's got the bishop pair, he should probably hold on to them, but there's a tactical problem with it too. So this is where I first get an advantage in the game. After I take back, suddenly there's three things hanging. The queen here is hitting the bishop, it's hitting this pawn, and then my bishop is hitting this pawn, and he can't defend all three. So, you know, it was a harmless looking exchange, but you have to look at the position of what happens after the exchange. And he just has too much stuff hanging right here. So the weaknesses on his king side did eventually come back to bite him, but it was this final push to g5 that really is one of the roots of his problems here, leaving that loose pawn on g5. Anyway, he played knight e2. That's a good move. It defends the bishop, and the queen defends the pawn, but I can grab the g-pawn and I come out a pawn up. Well, let's see. It's not the end of the world being a pawn up here. It's my pawns are doubled over here on the king side, but it is an advantage for the endgame. He played queen f3, went bishop to f6, just getting my bishop out of the way. Well, it's defended by my knight and offering to trade off his bishop, which is a good piece here. Let's see, he went rook a to d1, so I went ahead and got my queen out of the way. He decided to trade at that point. So all this, I'm maintaining some kind of advantage through this part here. And rook d1 here, this is an interesting moment in the game because I was able to increase my advantage a little bit. So rook d1 comes with the threat of rook takes rook, queen takes rook. And I had spotted that because it leaves my c-pawn hanging. And so I moved my c-pawn right away. And then I realized he could still play queen c6 and come after the exchange. He could still play queen c6 and harass my pawns over here, but I realized my queen on d1 would be threatening a check and picking up a pawn over here, so that c5 move is actually a good move. He went ahead with this plan, and then he hesitated at this point. Maybe he realized that things were not so simple, or maybe he was just checking to see if he was getting mated here, because he ended up playing queen c6 anyway, and that's just a mistake. Here he needs to play something like this. He could play c takes b5 and a4, and well, I'm still a pawn up, but he's getting counterplay. He can get a passed pawn over here on the queen side, it looks like, and so that may, well, it gives him some chances to hold the game. Instead, queen c6, this leads to a position which is pretty clearly winning for me. Queen d1 check, king g2, because I go a second pawn up, and we're close enough to the endgame that's really important here. See, he grabbed on a6, I grab on c4. And now there's no tricks. Sometimes there's a trick like moving a pawn forward to exploit this this pin here, but it doesn't work because in this case I can just take with the queen. And so let's see, he threw in this check, and so I keep my winning advantage for quite a while. But there is another flurry of exciting moves coming up. So let's just go forward to the next mistakes. You can argue with some of these moves, but it does keep the edge. And of course, white is doing a good job in this part of trying to just harass me and make my life difficult. And you know, that's kind of what you want to do. It just takes one blunder to turn this game around. He gave up a pawn here. Well, he wasn't giving up a pawn here. He was attacking my pawn and offering this trade. And it was getting, it seemed to me, hard. It was kind of hard for me to keep defending these pawns. I would rather keep them together, but I couldn't push past this pawn. So I went ahead and went along with this trade, and then I got my queen in front of the pawn and started pushing it forward. So I think, you know, while that was technically okay, maybe it made my life a little more difficult, but I didn't see a way to avoid it. Anyway, the chess engine did not have any suggestions for better moves that I noticed. So now he's getting pressure on the pawn. He's going to maneuver his knight around and try and win it. So I step my queen to the side with queen d1 so I can threaten to queen right away. But this knight is, in addition to maybe maneuvering and thinking of attacking this pawn, is also thinking of attacking over here. So queen d1 was not, it turns out, the most accurate move here, although still winning. But this is a case where there is an improvement. The chess engine found the move queen d2. It's a better way to try and deal with this counterplay. You know, one of the problems I have, you know, whenever I have a stronger player look at my games and he sees positions like this where I start getting into trouble, he says, well, you know, you've got to eliminate all your opponent's counterplay. It's just hard for me to figure out how to do that. But this seems to be the purpose of queen d2 here. It helps to eliminate the counterplay. So it might go like this: queen c8 check, driving my king to the side, knight takes f7. Then I have this move here, queen takes f2 check. And so that check buys me a little time to get me out of trouble down here. It still seems like a position where there's a lot of counterplay, but technically that's better than what I played. Queen d1 is what I played. He went queen c8 check, and we get this kind of line. I go king h7. He goes knight takes f7. And I went knight g8 to block the queen coming in here with mate. And that leads to a draw with best play. So I'm still winning here, but I have to find the magic move here. There's one move for black that allows black to continue to play for a win, and is actually still winning for black. So if you want to pause the video here, see if you can find the move. Okay, I'm giving the answer away now. So the move here is g5, with the idea of creating an escape square for the king. So the queen comes over here to check my king. I can just step into g6, and it just seems that I managed to escape the checks, and eventually I will get to queen this pawn or do something else that will lead to a win. So anyway, knight g8 should lead to a draw with best play, and he plays this correctly. Knight g5 check, king h8, he checks me again, I go back, he checks me again, I go up, and he checks me again. And now I just have to go back. There's really nothing better. The way I played it king h5 should lead to a loss. So here's another chance for you to check out your tactical vision, see if you can find the best move for white here. Okay, yeah, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away here. He had the right idea. He played queen g4 check, which looks like it's mating, except that my queen was on that square. The check that he needed to play was this move, queen c5 check. Now I can't interpose. I can't come forward or back. I have to go to this square. And now my queen is still guarding this square. You have to be careful to get to the right square, but his knight is protecting the queen on this square, and that is just mate. So king h5 walks into a mate in 2 or 3. It's actually 3 technically, because I can interpose the queen once, but it's basically a mate in 2. Anyway, fortunately for me, he played queen g4 check, and then after this trade, I am once again winning. I could have taken this pawn here. I think I just didn't notice that it was hanging. But after I take here, he gets this check. I mean, this still is winning, but I'll say king f5 to avoid more checks. But he gets his knight to this square d3 where he stops me from queening immediately. So it would make it a longer game, and it would present more challenges. So king h4 was actually the better move, maybe a little bit unintentional. And now this is a win. He chases me around, but I get my queen right away, and there's no mate here. So he played on for quite a bit, since I guess he was disappointed at missing his win. Maybe he noticed that he had a win there, and but at this point he decided to give up. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you later. Bye.